District Attorney for Logan and Payne County. And I'd like to bring up Miss Jill Ochs Tontz. We did invite incumbent Laura Austin Thomas, but she declined to be here this evening. Jill, first off, would you please introduce yourself? What compelled you to seek office and your vision for the office?
First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Jill Tontz. I am from Guthrie. I like to tell people I was born in Guthrie and raised in Guthrie, but I was also raised in Stillwater. So I cut my teeth in both of those counties. I worked as an assistant district attorney under the former district attorney, Robert L. Hudson. He wrote me a letter to go to law school and then gave me my first job. I worked for 6 months doing misdemeanors, and I worked my tail off to where I was promoted to be the lead prosecuting attorney for sex crimes, child pornography, child abuse, domestic violence, or any kind of major crime in those areas. And that was probably the highlight of my career, was doing those types of crimes. I also was, I say blessed, because working with victims is one of the best parts about that job. And I was blessed to handle the State v. Darrell Williams jury trial, which was a 3-week-long jury trial that I handled by myself as the lead prosecutor. So that was kind of the highlight of my career. Loved doing that, but I also had to take a break from that. Handling sex crimes is one of the toughest things you can do as a prosecutor, but it is also the most rewarding. So for the past 5 years, I've had a family practice where I do primarily juvenile law, where I was the court-appointed special advocate attorney of the year for 2 years for my advocacy for children of child abuse and neglect. And I see a former member of the Department of Human Services local division who I worked with in those cases. But that's kind of my background. Now, to answer your question why I'm running, I didn't forget you. So I was raised where you can do one of two things. You can sit back and you can watch things happen and complain about them, or you can get up and you can do something about them. Being a former prosecutor and caring very deeply for the citizens in these communities, both of them, I live here, my families live here, my nephews live here, my children live here. What I saw happening over the last 3 years compelled me to run. And so in doing that, some of the things that I saw 23 different assistant district attorneys ran through both of these offices in 3 years. That is unheard of in the previous 20 years of this county. I saw at least 9 support staff in Logan County leave in the last 3 years, to where right now we have all new people. I saw the highest number of hung jury trials, which means the state of Oklahoma is presenting a case and a jury cannot come to a verdict of either an acquittal or of guilt, which means that the state has to retry a case again, which costs taxpayer dollars. I think that can come for many different reasons, but we saw the highest number of hung juries in 3 years in the previous 20 years. I saw the highest number of murder cases just dismissed with no explanation in 3 years. I saw low morale among the employees in both counties, and I saw discontentment and an inability to work efficiently with law enforcement in both counties. Those are things that did not exist when I was in the district attorney's office. It just did not exist. And so our office under Rob Hudson ran efficiently, it ran smoothly, and I believe that I am the type of person, and I have the experience necessary because I have worked in both counties, both offices, which are very different, to restore it back to what it was. And we've got to stop some of these things from happening, and that's why I've ran.
All the questions that are here are submitted by citizens.
Okay.
What would be an alternative that you are willing to apply to drug and alcohol offenses, unpaid fines, and other offenses that are not harmful to the community yet are being incarcerated for?
So what I like to tell people in line with this question is that many people don't know what a district attorney does until you fall on two sides of the coin. You either have been charged with an offense and you're coming to the office as a defendant, or you're coming to the office because you've been the victim of a crime. And included in that, one thing that I would do in almost every case is you have to listen to victims. Even if that's a victim of a property crime, you have to do that. And so no matter what your recommendation would be as an assistant district attorney or a district attorney, you have to listen to victims and you have to get their input. The second thing in regard to, I think you said drug offenses, alcohol offenses, some of what I will call nonviolent offenses that people are being incarcerated for. We cannot ignore that we live in a state today where we have the highest incarceration rate for nonviolent offenses. It is what it is. That comes from the fact that an assistant district attorney has broad leeway and broad authority in all aspects. That means when a police report comes across their desk to charge the crime, which is, as a caveat, why I think we see so many charges either being in hung juries or they're just straight dismissals, is because we're charging in this administration crimes in the incorrect way. We're either overcharging or we're undercharging. And so when we're dealing with nonviolent offenses, we have to look at the whole picture. What led this person to get in trouble? You know, sometimes somebody's picked up on a property crime, but there's a substance abuse issue. And so what I would like to do, if elected to the office of district attorney, is formulate an interpersonnel memorandum that we would hand out to either the defendant or the defense attorney, asking them to provide some type of background on that defendant. So if this person has a history of mental health, if this person is a veteran that has, post-traumatic stress disorder, whatever it is, we need to know that because we've got to delve to the problem. And I think if we start looking at the problem behind the crime, that will help us better evaluate what type of recommendation or sentence we're going to hand out. Secondly, there is a difference between somebody who wants to get help and somebody who does not. Someone who wants to get help, we've got to provide resources such as mental health courts. That takes a lot of work in our community with service providers. We've got to get together with them, write some grants, and try and get the money to do that. Cleveland County, I think Oklahoma County has one as well. Excellent mental health court programs. Even if we don't have the funds initially, which we're not going to start one of those, the district attorney has the right and the ability to implement within their own office how we're going to handle those types of offenders. And so, we could detail their plea recommendation, if on a plea of guilty, to detail their services to what they need to do in order to correct the condition that hopefully they are not going to come back across our desk. Now, somebody who repeatedly commits a crime, it is what it is. If you are going to be in our society and you're going to continuously commit crimes and have victims and cause, there's all kind of trickle-down effects from that, you're going to be punished. And it is what it is. So I am for smart reform. I believe that victims have a say in what we're going to recommend in certain charges. But certainly, I do believe we've got to try and rehabilitate who we can. But if you're going to recommit offenses, you're going to be punished for that.
Thank you. There's been a lot of turnover with assistant district attorneys in the last year. What will you do to maintain some consistency with your personnel?
Well, I think leadership starts at the top, and I think any public servant should have a servant's heart. We don't do this. It's kind of like law enforcement. Nobody does this job for the money, and you certainly shouldn't do it for the power. You do it because you have a heart to serve, and you love victims, and you care about your communities. If you don't exude that from the top, it's not going to be at the bottom. So I've tried to talk a lot about this turnover because that's just unheard of to me. I loved my job. I went to work every day and I felt like I had a purpose and that we were making a difference in a lot of people's lives. And I think that's how it should be. So I certainly would try and mirror my administration, much like that of Rob Hudson. We had staff meetings. We were like a family. We cared very deeply for each other. We communicated. I will tell you right now that I work, even in private practice, with both counties and both offices. And the tough thing is trying to express to people what's going on because you guys don't see that. And sometimes you can only see it if you're kind of in the trenches. And what I would tell you is we have a lot of disconnect in both counties. And you would think because they have the same boss, meaning the same district attorney, that both counties would be in board and online with each other, and they're not. And so I would mandate, obviously, extensive training for my employees. I think we would set consistent patterns on how we're going to handle certain types of offenses, how we're going to handle law enforcement. I heard a story the other day that one of our elected officials, who is a sheriff, sat outside of an office for at least 30 minutes before someone spoke with him. on an offense. And that is unheard of to me. The district attorney must work hand in hand with law enforcement. If you don't, you're not going to successfully prosecute any crime. And so I can tell you that that would be one of my number one goals, is to re-implement the relationship between the district attorney and law enforcement, including assistant DAs. And if you have all those things, if people love their job, if people want to come to work and they feel like they're making a difference and they're encouraged, they're gonna stay there. And that's what I plan on doing, and we do not have that right now.
Next question. What factors specifically would you consider in striking a balance between zealous prosecution and needless incarceration?
It goes back to, I think, training your employees. And, for example, I had a case that, and there's been a lot of talk about, I'm a defense attorney. My practice in private practice is 75% family law and juvenile law. I do about 25% of criminal practice. I don't think, and by the way, at least 3 of the current assistant DAs were all defense attorneys, because that's kind of what you are if you're not in the DA's office. But that makes you a better prosecutor. And here's why. These people are human beings. None of us are above any of the other ones, and we should all be treated fairly. And I think that you have to look at these people as human beings, not as somebody who comes across your desk on a piece of paper. And I'll be honest, I sent a lot of people to prison, obviously, for harming children. And that's my background and that's my passion, and I won't blink an eye. If you harm a child or you molest a child or you do something like that, I won't bat an eye at sending you to prison. That's just me. I think that's our job as prosecutors, is to protect the public from who we need to protect them from. Now, I had this case where a guy was picked up with marijuana, and the rec from this current administration, and I've got the emails that I sent back in 2015 asking why I've been through 8 different ADAs and why I've been waiting 90 days with no response from anyone in their office. And then I finally, I'm sorry, I should throw this in there. Why someone who had pled guilty to their second robbery charge, where, robbery, you've got 2 actually human being victims, why that person was given a 10 suspended, means paper time, no jail, and my guy, who had picked up a second marijuana charge, simple possession, this was before the state question, his rec was 10 years to do and an $18,000 fine. This is an individual who spent 2 years bettering his life. He had a child. He got caught up on child support. He had a job. He purchased a home. And this administration, even back in 15, would not look at mitigating circumstances around this individual. I ended up doing a blind plea, which, if you don't know a lot about the legal world, is a very scary thing. But I'm so thankful that 2 judges in our district saw through that and gave that guy 4 years of probation time. And, he was certainly rewarded for turning his life around. Those are the types of people that I think the state of Oklahoma is screaming out for, that we've got to give a chance. Now, not everybody's like that. I mean, most people will tell you I'm pretty tough. So if you want to prove yourself to me that you're going to work hard and you're going to give it a shot and do what you're supposed to do to be an upstanding citizen, I'm going to go down that road with you and give you the opportunity on your first offense. But if you're not, then it's probably not going to look good for you. But we have to look at mitigating evidence if it's presented, which goes back to the form I would like to give out on every offense, because we need to know that as prosecutors what's going on in these individuals' lives. Do they have support systems? Do they have family? What are the things going on? Because we know statistically, if we can get them those resources, we're probably not going to see them again. And if we don't, we're going to see them again for probably the next 5 years. So when looking at zealously prosecuting, it goes towards that argument that I just spoke about, but it also goes towards, we have to treat everyone fairly, and we shouldn't be prosecuting cases to get our faces in the paper. Shouldn't be doing press conferences on murder cases as they're pending. We should not be calling newspapers. No offense, Chris, I love you, I know you're in the media.
No problem.
But seriously, when I was under Rob Hudson, we did not notify the news press when we arraigned people for murder charges so that they could come in the courthouse and stand there and video us giving we kept our mouth shut. I mean, you didn't give statements, especially if a case was pending. To me, that's not proper right now. And I want that to stop, because these are serious cases. They are serious issues for the community. They're serious issues for the victims, and they're serious issues, and I think that can actually compromise the integrity of prosecuting those cases. So we need somebody, and I believe I am that person, who's there for the heart of it that we love it, we want to serve, and we want to do what's right, and I don't think that's going on right now.
What does reform mean to you? We've been hearing a lot about gun control. It's one of many terms that gets thrown around as propaganda, but nobody talks about what it really means to them subjectively as an elected official. What would criminal justice reform look like under your administration?
I am for smart reform, but I am absolutely not for just letting everyone walk out the door. Because here's the thing. Some people who are continuously charged with a crime, it's a game to them. They know they can walk in there, plead guilty to 5 years, are going to do about 28. Sometimes I just heard the other day somebody did 28 days and got turned out. If they know that, where is the bark or the bite, so to speak, in that particular plea agreement? Of course they're going to reoffend because they would rather take that deal than doing services and trying to treat the problem. So it can also be beneficial that we kind of force them to be on probation, so to speak, because we want them to get the help and the resources they need. What we see on TV in criminal justice reform, and I was asked to sign a questionnaire by the ACLU, and I'm not going to sign that. You cannot look at a district attorney's office and have a bright line rule for every case you get. They are very fact specific, and we have to look at the facts surrounding that charge. One of the things that is on that questionnaire that I was asked to sign was, make a pledge to never seek a monetary bond, make a pledge to never seek the death penalty. Well, you tell me, you look in someone's face that someone has raped or murdered a child and tell their family if that's what they want to pursue that you won't do that. I'm not going to do that. That's not my place. And so I think that the philosophy behind it is really great. And yes, there are some things that we need to do differently right now in Oklahoma. There are people in prison for 20 years on nonviolent possession of marijuana. And then we have this state question coming up. So in my opinion, I have always been a supporter of, someone who is truly a threat to our community, who is truly a threat to our societies. They're a threat to my children, your family, your children, your grandchildren. Those are the individuals that I don't mind paying for if they're in jail. And I believe that my administration, I know, would pursue down that line of crimes. It is really hard to rehabilitate someone who harms a child or molests a child. It is what it is. Now, mental health, substance abuse, those are the types of things that we can rehabilitate. And if we try that and we do that and it fails, then our only option sometimes is to sentence somebody to incarceration.
Your final thoughts?
First I'd like to thank the Chamber and the Logan County Republican Party and you guys for coming. I think it's very unfortunate that my opponent chose not to come here tonight and debate me. This is a 2-county race. It's Payne County and it's Logan County, and the 2 counties should be treated equally, the same importance. And I can assure you that if I'm elected, Logan County will be treated in the same respect as Payne County, and we've got to start doing that. Again, justice should be blind. I've got an email right now where an elected official called the current administration, made some phone calls, and their niece's criminal charge was dismissed. That is unacceptable. Unacceptable. And our counties and our communities cannot afford to have another 4 years under Laura Thomas. And if you don't know much about this office, I would urge you to reach out to law enforcement, victims, or anybody that has dealings with these offices. And I think that you will be pretty startled by what you learned. I have the experience necessary. My husband owns a power line company, and we manage about 15 employees on that regard. And I have been in private practice. I am familiar with both counties. I am familiar with the judges. I'm familiar with law enforcement, and I know that I can turn this around. And I definitely, again, just can't urge you enough. Reach out and look at these cases. We've had 7, I counted I've got a whole long list, but just since the end of March, just so you know, we've had 7 murder cases, dismissed. And the quote from your current elected district attorney was due to insufficient evidence. Well, let me tell you something. There was a preliminary hearing case, which is what I call a medium level hearing, where a different judge finds whether or not there was probable cause that someone committed a crime. and whether or not there was sufficient evidence that that person did commit that crime. That judge bound that person over for trial court arraignment in those cases, meaning a judge found there was sufficient evidence. So we have 2 cases in the last 60 days that were dismissed, sexual battery charges dismissed, and a second-degree rape. So just in 60 days, I mean, if you want to sit down with me, I can give you a whole long more list. But the point being, people aren't charged with first-degree murder and it just disappears. That should alarm everyone. And so I urge you to pay attention. Do not read a soundbite. My opponent says that she's been an attorney in the DA's office for 30 years. I will submit to you for 20 of those. She was not in our courthouse, and she was across the street doing admin work, running child support. So I was in the courtroom trying cases. So do not be misled by a soundbite. And that's for any election, any opponent. Do your research and actually talk to people who dealt with them, because facts can be manipulated, or anybody can kind of skew it to be how they want it to be, but you can't change looking online and seeing that these things are being dismissed at an alarmingly high rate. And so the district attorney is an office not of policy, but of action, and it really does protect you guys and your communities and your children. So humbly ask for your vote. My website is www.jilltontzforda.com, and there are letters of recommendation and more information about myself. And I'm an open book, so if you have a question, get with me.